A Hell's Angel rescues a dying cop, but it was no accident. He needed her to wage a secret war against a common enemy. Now their forbidden alliance threatens to destroy both their worlds from the inside out. If you're new here, subscribe and comment your location. Now let's begin. The gravelly voice cut through the fog of pain, a lifeline thrown into a churning sea of agony. Don't you dare close your eyes. Look at me. Detective Maria Rodriguez fought to obey, her eyelids fluttering against the overwhelming urge to surrender to the darkness. The world was a tilted, nauseating blur of wet brick and distant, mocking neon. The face that swam into focus above her was all hard lines and shadow, framed by a wild, dark beard and long hair tucked under a denim cut. The patch on his chest was unmistakable, the winged death's head of the Hell's Angels. The name stitched above it was Jax. A fresh wave of panic, cold and sharp, tried to pierce the haze. A cop. She was a cop, lying in a pool of her own blood in a stinking alley, and a Hell's Angel was crouched over her. This was the ignoble end she'd always half expected, but not like this. Not after being gunned down by her own partner. "Easy, detective," Jax murmured, his hands surprisingly deft, calloused but precise, applying firm pressure to the gunshot wound in her abdomen. His touch was clinical, at odds with his outlaw appearance. "Breathe. Just breathe. Ambulance is on its way." "My partner," Maria gasped, the memory a searing brand on her mind. Ben's face, usually so open and friendly, contorted into a cold mask as he'd raised his service weapon. The shock in his eyes had been mirrored by her own. "Ben, I know," Jax said, his voice devoid of surprise. His eyes, a startling clear gray, held hers. They weren't the eyes of a mindless thug. They were the eyes of a strategist, calculating, assessing a complex battlefield. "We've been watching him, watching the whole rotten crew you call colleagues. They're moving product on our turf. Your partner just made it personal." The revelation was a second, more devastating gunshot. Ben, her friend, her brother in arms. The man she'd trusted with her life had tried to take it because she'd gotten too close to the truth about a drug ring operating with police protection. And this outlaw, this man who represented everything she was sworn to fight, had been the one to find her. Not by chance, by design. He'd been surveilling the corrupt cops, and she had stumbled into his crosshairs. The wail of sirens grew from a faint promise to a screaming reality. Jax's head snapped up, his body coiling like a spring. "Listen to me, Rodriguez. They'll tell you it was a random mugging, a tragic act of violence. They'll close the case fast and clean. You play along, you play dumb, you heal." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to an urgent, gravelly whisper that vibrated through her pain. "When you're ready, when you want to clean your goddamn house, you come find me. The Devil's Advocates Bar. Ask for me." He pressed a bandana into her hand, the black and red cloth he'd been using to staunch her blood. It was warm and soaked, then with a fluid, silent movement he was gone, vanishing into the deeper shadows of the alley just as paramedics in a squad car, its lights painting the brick walls in frantic pulses of blue and red, screeched to a halt at the alley's mouth. The official story was exactly as Jax had predicted. A botched robbery, a tragic random act of violence. Her captain, a weary man named Davies with bags under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights, stood by her hospital bed, his expression a carefully constructed mask of concern that didn't quite reach the depths of his pupils. "We'll get him, Maria," Captain Davies said, his voice a practiced, soothing baritone. "I've got my best men on it, I promise you." But Maria saw the lie. She saw the way Ben stood just behind him, his face a perfect, award-winning sculpture of grief and simmering anger. She saw the flicker of unease in the captain's gaze, the way his eyes darted away from hers for a fraction of a second too long. She was alone, A wounded animal in a den of wolves wearing a badge that had become a target on her chest. Weeks of painful, lonely recovery followed, endless physical therapy that felt like learning to walk again, both physically and metaphorically. Debriefings where she parroted the official line, her voice a hollow monotone. Hollow condolences from colleagues whose hands she no longer wanted to shake. Every day she felt the weight of the secret, the phantom feel of the rough, blood-caked bandana she kept hidden in a sock drawer. The moral line she had sworn to uphold, the thin blue line, was blurring, smudged beyond recognition by Ben's betrayal and the memory of Jax's steady, life-saving hands. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. She was clearing out her desk, having been put on indefinite, stress-related administrative leave, when she overheard Ben and another officer, a brutish, cynical man named Stallworth, laughing in the break room. Their voices were low, conspiratorial. Lucky the scavengers didn't finish her off, Ben chuckled, the sound making Maria's blood run cold. Saves us the trouble of a more permanent solution. That was it. The last thread of her loyalty to the Force, as she knew it, snapped with an almost audible twang. The Devil's Advocate's bar was exactly what she had imagined, and yet somehow more. A low-slung, windowless building of stained concrete and corrugated metal on the industrial edge of town, bathed in the malevolent glow of red neon and the constant low-throated rumble of Harley engines. The moment she pushed open the heavy, scarred wooden door, the conversation inside died a sudden death. Every eye in the smoke-hazed room, hard and unblinking and deeply suspicious, turned to her. She was a peacock in a den of vultures, her posture, her bearing, everything about her screaming cop, even in her civilian jeans and worn leather jacket. She forced her feet to move, her boot heels echoing on the sticky floor. She walked to the bar, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. The bartender, a mountain of a man with a thick neck and a scar bisecting his eyebrow, stared her down, a dirty rag frozen in his hand. "I'm here to see Jax," she said, her voice cutting through the silence, steadier than she felt. The bartender didn't speak for a long moment, his eyes doing a slow, dismissive sweep of her. Then he gave a curt grunt and nodded toward a dark, secluded booth in the very back of the room. "He's expecting you." Jax was there, alone, a bottle of top-shelf whiskey and 2 clean glasses on the table before him. He looked up as she approached, those storm-gray eyes scanning her, taking in the determined set of her jaw, the lingering stiffness in her stance, the fire of purpose she knew was burning in her own gaze. "Detective," he said, his voice a low rumble. He gestured for her to sit. "I was wondering if you'd come." "You knew I would," she replied, sliding into the booth opposite him. The leather seat creaked ominously under her weight. "I hoped," he corrected softly. He poured 2 fingers of amber liquid into a glass and pushed it across the table toward her. "Your partner and his friends are bad for business. Cops on the take are unpredictable. They get greedy. They step on toes. Our toes." "So this is just business?" Maria asked, her voice tight. She made no move to touch the whiskey. "You saved my life as a strategic investment?" Jax took a slow, deliberate sip of his own drink, his eyes never leaving hers. "It started that way." He leaned forward, the table groaning slightly under the shift of his weight. The scent of leather and clean night air clung to him. "Now let's just say I've developed a personal interest in seeing that smug bastard Ben and his whole corrupt world burn to the ground." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping. "Here's the deal, Rodriguez. You're on the inside, but you're out in the cold. I'm on the outside, but my network sees everything the sun doesn't touch. You feed me intel, schedules, drop points, names, financial trails. We use our particular methods to dismantle their operation piece by piece. We cut off the head, the body dies. It was an unholy alliance, a pact with the devil. But as she looked into his eyes, the devil she knew, Jax, was starting to look a hell of a lot more trustworthy than the angels with badges who had left her for dead. "And what do you get out of this? Once they're gone?" she asked, finally wrapping her fingers around the cool glass. The whiskey shimmered in the low light. A slow, dangerous smile touched Jax's lips, transforming his face from hardened to devastatingly attractive. "We get our territory back, clean. We get respect. The club doesn't give up its empire, detective. We never do. We just manage the competition." Maria looked from the glass to the man across from her. He was a criminal. He dealt in violence and intimidation in a world governed by its own brutal code, but he had saved her. He was offering her the only weapon she had left to fight the monsters wearing her face. Him. She picked up the glass and knocked the whiskey back in one burning, decisive gulp. It seared a path of fire down her throat, settling like a coal of resolve in her stomach. "Okay," she said, her voice raw with the liquor and the weight of her choice. "Okay, let's burn it all down." And so, the most improbable, volatile partnership in the city's underworld was born. Maria, the wounded hawk, grounded and caged within the precinct's walls, and Jax, the wolf, running free in the darkness outside. Their communication was a masterclass in clandestine tradecraft, a dance of shadows and secrets. Burner phones that were used once and then destroyed. Dead drops in the hollow of a specific gnarled tree in a deserted public park. Coded messages left under a specific moss-covered rock near the riverbank, the ink invisible until held to a flame. Maria fed him everything. The schedule for the next major shipment coming through the docks, hidden in a container of plastic toys. The names of the patrol officers on Ben's payroll, paid to look the other way during key transfers. Most damning of all, the financial records Ben thought he'd hidden behind layers of encryption, which Maria, using her departmental access, had painstakingly traced to a shell corporation owned by none other than Captain Davies himself. And Jax's club went to work with brutal, surgical efficiency. It wasn't subtle. A warehouse owned by one of Ben's fronts was raided not by police but by a silent, swift team of angels. The product was taken, the guards left tied up for the real police to find, with a neat, incriminating file of documents pinned to the chest of the head guard with a throwing knife. A key money launderer, a slick financier named Sterling, was found wandering the streets in nothing but his silk boxers, babbling incoherently about men with wings. After all, his financial records linking him directly to Davies were anonymously uploaded to a public server for the world to see. The police force was thrown into disarray, a nest of ants kicked over. It wasn't an attack from a rival gang, it was a systematic surgical dismantling from someone who knew their every move, their every secret. Paranoia spread like a virus through the precinct. The Internal Affairs Division, usually sidelined and ignored, was suddenly everywhere, their presence a silent accusation. The hallowed blue wall of silence began to crack under the immense strain of mutual suspicion. No one knew who to trust. Through it all, the line between Maria and Jax began to blur, smudged by proximity and shared purpose. Their meetings, once purely transactional and held in the shadowy booth of the bar, stretched longer, ventured into different territories. Sometimes he'd meet her on a park bench in the pale, hopeful light of dawn, the city waking up around them. Once he took her on the back of his motorcycle, the powerful machine thrumming between her thighs, to a secluded cliff overlooking the city. The wind whipped through their hair as they stood side by side, pointing out the locations of their next moves on the urban skyline spread below them like a lit-up game board. The chemistry between them was a live wire, constantly humming with a dangerous, addictive voltage. It was in the way his hand would brush against hers when passing a burner phone, the contact sending a jolt up her arm. The way his gaze would linger on her mouth when she was explaining a complex piece of evidence, his focus shifting from the information to the woman delivering it. The way he'd instinctively moved to shield her from sight when a patrol car drove by during a meet, his body a solid, warm, and protective wall at her back. One evening, after a particularly tense drop of information in a part of town that made her nerves sing, a sudden violent summer downpour caught them completely off guard. They took shelter in an abandoned auto body shop they used as a secondary safe house, the rain hammering a frantic, deafening rhythm on the corrugated metal roof. "You're shivering," Jax observed, his voice echoing slightly in the cavernous, oil-stained space. The air smelled of rust and ozone. "I'm fine," Maria insisted, though her teeth were chattering uncontrollably. The cold, combined with the residual adrenaline from nearly being seen, was a potent cocktail. He didn't argue. He simply walked over to a rusted, empty oil drum, kicked it onto its side, and with a few old rags and a flick of his Zippo started a small, defiant fire. The flames leapt to life, casting long, dancing shadows that twisted across the grimy walls and his face. He came and stood behind her, not touching her, just close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, a furnace in the damp chill. "You know this can't last forever," he said quietly, his voice a low rumble next to her ear. "Once this is done, you're still a cop. I'm still what I am." Maria turned to face him. The firelight caught the flecks of silver in his gray eyes, turning them to molten mercury. The air between them was so thick with unsaid things, with fear and want and a desperate, clawing need, that it was hard to breathe. "I don't know what I am anymore," she whispered. The confession laid bare between them, more vulnerable than any physical wound. That was all the invitation he needed. He closed the small, charged distance, his hand coming up to cup her jaw, his thumb stroking the line of her cheekbone with a devastating gentleness that shattered her completely. His touch was a paradox, the hand of a violent man offering the softest of caresses. "Then let's not think about forever," he murmured, his breath warm and sweet with whiskey against her lips. "Let's just have right now." And then he kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a claiming, a confession, a release of all the pent-up tension, fear, and desperate attraction that had been building between them for weeks. It was fire and rain, the taste of rebellion and recklessness. Her hands fisted in the worn leather of his vest, pulling him closer, her body molding against the hard planes of his as if they were two halves of a broken whole finally snapping together. In that moment, there was no badge, no cut, no betrayal. There was only the storm outside, the fire within, the smell of rain and leather, and the terrifying, exhilarating feeling of free fall into the abyss with the one person who understood the fall completely. The final move was upon them. Maria, using her waning but still present access, had gotten the ultimate piece of intelligence, a summit. Ben, Captain Davies, and the head of the drug cartel they served were all meeting at a remote, foreclosed farmhouse to discuss the unfortunate disruptions and plan their counter-offensive. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to catch them all together, conspiring, their guilt undeniable. But there was a critical, terrifying problem. "I can't call it in," Maria told Jax, her voice tight with frustration. They were back at their cliff, the city lights twinkling below, oblivious to the tension crackling between them. "The moment I do, Ben will get a tip-off from someone still inside. It has to look like an external hit. It has to look like the angels finally went to war. It has to look like you." Jax looked at her, his expression unreadable, a granite mask. "You're asking me to walk my club into a potential trap? To have my men take the fall both literally and figuratively for cleaning up your department's mess? I'm asking you to help me finish this," she said, her eyes pleading, her hand reaching out to rest on his forearm. She felt the hard muscle tense under her touch. "After this, I'll have all the evidence I need. I can go to the feds, the state police, someone clean. I can give them everything. I can clear your name from this specific operation. You'll have your territory clean, and the satisfaction of knowing you helped take out the trash." He was silent for a long time, staring out at the city he ruled from the shadows. The wind tugged at his hair. "And what about us, Maria?" he finally asked, the question hanging between them more terrifying than any armed confrontation. "What happens to this when the smoke clears?" She had no answer. The future was a blank, terrifying map. The night of the meeting, the farmhouse was an island of arrogant light in a sea of rural darkness. Inside, the three kings of corruption, the treacherous partner, the compromised captain, the ruthless cartel lord, sat around a heavy oak table, their faces grim in the lamplight. Outside, the angels descended, not with the roaring fanfare of their motorcycles, but in deadly, predatory silence. They were phantoms among the cornfields, shadows within the tree line, surrounding the property with an invisible, tightening noose. From her vantage point in a copse of trees several hundred yards away, Maria watched through high-powered binoculars, her service weapon a heavy, familiar weight in its shoulder holster. This was it, the endgame. The raid commenced with a silent signal. Jax's men moved with a precision that spoke of former military or years of hardened experience. There were shouts from inside, the sound of splintering wood as a door was kicked in, then the sharp, unmistakable crack of gunfire. Her police radio, tuned to the precinct band, crackled to life, making her jump. "Shots fired! Officer down! All units converge on the location. We have a tip. It's the Angels." Her blood turned to ice in her veins. They were early. Far too early. Ben had been tipped off. It was a double cross. The responding units weren't the clean ones. They were Ben's crew, his private militia within the PD, coming to finish the job, wipe out the Angels, and pin the entire mess on the club. She saw Jax, a formidable silhouette in the suddenly bright doorway of the farmhouse, realize it too. He was caught in a pincer movement, the enemy inside and the corrupted law outside closing in. Without a second thought, without a shred of her former hesitation, Maria drew her weapon and ran toward the chaos. She wasn't a detective in that moment. She wasn't even a cop. She was a soldier fighting for the man who had saved her, for the justice she still believed in, even if she had to break every rule in the book to get it. She was fighting for them. She burst into the clearing just as Ben and two of his lackeys emerged from the opposite tree line, their guns raised, trained directly on Jax's exposed back as he engaged a cartel gunman inside the house. "Ben, freeze!" she screamed, her voice slicing through the night. He turned, his face a comical mask of shock and fury illuminated by the farmhouse lights. "Maria, you're supposed to be dead?" Jax finished for him, spinning around, his own weapon now pointed at Ben. "She's harder to kill than you are loyal, you piece of shit." The standoff was a perfect, terrible tableau, frozen in time. The corrupt cops, the outlaw and the cop who stood squarely, defiantly between them. "You're siding with him?" Ben spat, his gun wavering between her and Jax. The betrayal in his voice was rich, hypocritical. "You're a traitor to your badge, to all of us." "I'm siding with the only person in this goddamn city who hasn't lied to me," Maria yelled back, her voice raw with a lifetime of disillusionment and a newfound ferocious love. A single shot rang out from the tree line. One of Ben's men fell, a dark hole blossoming on his forehead, taken down by a precise sniper shot from one of Jax's men. In the split second of distraction, Ben fired, not at Jax, at Maria, a final spiteful act of erasure. Time seemed to warp, to slow to a thick, syrupy crawl. Maria saw the muzzle flash, saw the utter cold determination in Ben's eyes to wipe his final mistake from the earth. But Jax was faster. He moved with an impossible preternatural speed born of instinct and something far deeper. He threw his body in front of hers, a human shield. The bullet meant for her heart struck him high in the shoulder, spinning him around with the impact. "Jax!" The scream was torn from her, a sound of pure, unadulterated agony. Rage, white-hot and blinding, consumed her. She didn't hesitate. She didn't aim. She simply pointed her weapon, the extension of her will, and squeezed the trigger twice. Crack. Crack. 2 rounds struck Ben's center mass. He looked down at his chest, a puzzled expression on his face, as if trying to understand a complex math problem, before his legs gave way and he crumpled to the dirt. The betrayal was now absolute and finally irrevocably over. The rest was a blur of noise and light. The sound of more sirens, these ones truly clean, FBI and internal affairs, filled the air. Jax's men, their objective complete, melted back into the night like the professionals they were. Captain Davies and the cartel boss were dragged out of the farmhouse in handcuffs, their empires crumbling around them. Maria ignored it all. She knelt in the cold, damp earth, cradling Jax's head in her lap, applying frantic pressure to the wound in his shoulder with the heel of her hand. His blood, warm and terrifying, soaked through her jeans. "You stupid, noble bastard," she whispered, tears she didn't know she was crying streaming down her face, dripping onto his. "You took a bullet for a cop." He managed a pained, bloody grin, his gray eyes hazy but focused on her. "Not for a cop," he gasped, each word an effort. "For you, Maria. Always for you." The aftermath was the earthquake that Jax had predicted, the one that shook the entire police force. The scandal was front-page news for weeks, a festering wound lanced open for the public to see. Dozens of officers were arrested, fired, or quietly pensioned off. The department was forced into a painful, humiliating, but necessary rebirth. The mayor gave speeches, reforms were promised. Maria was hailed as the hero, the brave whistleblower, the lone beacon of integrity in a swamp of corruption. She had her badge back, a promotion to lieutenant, the wary respect of her peers. But the victory felt hollow, a trophy won at too high a cost. The man who had made it all possible, the other half of her soul, was in the wind, recovering in some hidden clubhouse, a fugitive from the very justice they had served together. Weeks later, her life had settled into a new, sterile, and lonely normal. The danger was gone, but so was the fire, the purpose, the life. She was in her new, impersonal office, staring at a framed commendation that felt like a tombstone, when a plain, unmarked envelope was dropped on her desk by a wide-eyed rookie who said a civilian had dropped it off. Her heart stopped, then hammered back to life at a frantic pace. There was no name, no return address. Inside was a single brass key and a small folded map drawn by hand on a piece of coarse, almost parchment-like paper. And in the bottom corner, sketched in faint pencil, was a tiny, intricately detailed winged skull. Her hands trembled so violently she almost dropped the key. It was him. That night, under a canopy of 1,000,000 indifferent stars, she followed the map. It led her out of the city, down winding, forgotten back roads, to a secluded log cabin nestled deep in the woods, perched on the edge of a silent black lake that mirrored the night sky. The only light came from the windows, a soft, golden, promising glow. Her heart was a wild thing in her chest as she parked her car and walked toward the porch. This was the line, drawn in the dirt. On one side was her life, the badge, the order, the law, the hollow victory. On the other side was him. Chaos and loyalty and a love that had been forged in the hottest fires of betrayal and sacrifice. She walked to the door, the key cold and heavy in her palm. She didn't need it. The door was unlocked. She took a deep, shuddering breath, pushed it open, and stepped across the threshold. He was standing by the massive stone fireplace, his back to her, shirtless. The firelight danced over the hard, sculpted planes of his back, the tapestry of old tattoos that told stories of a life she could only imagine, and the fresh, angry pink scar high on his shoulder, a permanent physical monument to the night that had bound them together forever. He turned slowly, as if he had felt the shift in the air, the change in the light, the very beat of her heart. His gray eyes, those stormy, knowing pools she had fallen into so many times, found hers across the room. The air was thick, pregnant with everything that had been and everything that could be. "The club kept its empire," he said, his voice that familiar, gravelly rumble that never failed to send a shiver of want and recognition down her spine. "The territory is clean, for now." She swallowed, her throat almost too tight for words. "I kept my badge." A slow, knowing, deeply relieved smile touched his lips, softening the hard lines of his face. "So where does that leave us, Lieutenant?" Maria didn't answer with words. She crossed the room, the space between them feeling like the most significant journey she would ever undertake. She stopped just in front of him, close enough to feel the radiant heat from his body, to smell the familiar anchoring scents of leather and wood smoke and him. She reached up, her fingers hovering for a heartbeat before they gently, so gently traced the raised, rough outline of the scar on his shoulder. He flinched slightly at the touch, a reflex, but his eyes never wavered from hers. The touch was an electric current, jolting through both of them, completing a circuit that had been left open and sparking. It was an acknowledgement of his sacrifice, of her guilt, of their shared, impossible, glorious history. "It leaves us right here," she whispered, her voice thick with a love so profound it threatened to overwhelm her. That was all the confirmation he needed. His hand came up to cradle her jaw, his thumb stroking her cheekbone with a reverence that shattered the last of her defenses and rebuilt her, whole and new, in its place. He leaned in, and his lips found hers. This kiss was different from the first. It wasn't a collision of desperation or a release of tension. It was a homecoming. It was slow, deep, and devastatingly tender. A silent vow that spoke of a future she had been too afraid to hope for. It was a confession of a love that had grown in the darkest of places. A love that respected the badges and the cuts but transcended them both, rendering them meaningless. Her arms wound around his neck, pulling him closer, her body molding against his as if they were two pieces of a single broken whole finally made complete. The world, with all its rules and complications, ceased to exist. There was only this, only them. Later they lay tangled together in a heap of blankets and furs in front of the dying fire, the embers casting a warm, rosy glow on their skin. Her head was pillowed on his good shoulder, her fingers idly tracing the patterns of ink and old scars that mapped his chest. The world outside, with all its rules and complications, felt a million miles away. "This can't be easy," she murmured into the comfortable quiet, her voice husky. "A cop and an angel." Jax's chest rumbled with a low, contented chuckle. "Nothing worth having ever is, Maria." He shifted, turning to look at her, his expression serious but his eyes soft. "The club knows, they accept it. You're under our protection, always. But you'll always be an outsider to them, and I'll always be an outlaw to your world." "I don't care about my world," she said, and she realized with a stunning, absolute clarity that it was the utter, complete truth. "Not anymore. I care about this, I care about you." He kissed her forehead, a gesture so tender it brought fresh, happy tears to her eyes. "Then we make our own world," he said simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "Right here. On our own terms." And they did. Maria didn't quit the force. Her sense of justice, though forever altered and scarred, was still a fundamental part of who she was. But she requested a transfer to the cold case unit, a quieter, more anonymous desk that gave her the peace and the distance from the front lines that she now craved. Her partnership with Jax evolved into something deeper, more powerful, and entirely unspoken. She was his eyes and ears in the world of officialdom, a whisper of warning when the law circled too close to the club's legitimate businesses, a ghost in the machine working to keep their worlds from colliding. and he was her shadow, her protector, the keeper of her most vulnerable self, the one who knew the truth of her heart. Their love was a secret, fiercely guarded, a precious and volatile thing they protected at all costs. It existed in the stolen spaces between her day shifts and his club meetings, in the long, hidden weekends at the cabin, in the secret language of their shared looks across a crowded city street. It was in the way he'd leave a single perfect wildflower on the dashboard of her unmarked car, or the way she'd secretly stock his fridge at the cabin with his favorite imported beer. It was a life of duality, of constant calculation, but it was their life. The police force never knew what truly happened that night at the farmhouse. They saw a hero cop who had purged their ranks of a cancer. They never saw the woman who had found her soulmate, her other half, in the arms of the enemy, who had discovered that true loyalty wasn't about a badge or a patch, but about the unwavering, fierce, and unbreakable bonds of the heart. One evening, a year later, they stood on the porch of the cabin watching the sunset paint the surface of the lake in shades of fire and molten gold. Jack stood behind her, his arms wrapped around her waist, his chin resting gently on top of her head. "It's a good life," he murmured into her hair, his voice content. Maria leaned back into his solid, unwavering warmth, a contented sigh escaping her lips. She looked out at the peaceful, darkening water, then down at her hand, which was laced with his. On her finger, next to her simple silver band, was a new, heavier, custom-made ring he'd given her. A sleek, stylized angel with wings that wrapped protectively around her finger, forged from the melted-down brass of the spent bullet casing he'd taken from his own shoulder. "It's a complicated life," she corrected softly, a small, private, utterly happy smile playing on her lips. He turned her in his arms, his gray eyes soft and full of a love that still sometimes took her breath away. "But it's ours." "Yes," she said, rising on her toes to kiss him, a kiss that tasted of sunset and forever. "It's ours." And as the last light of day faded, surrendering to the stars, the deep, confident roar of a single motorcycle engine broke the silence of the woods, not as a threat, but as a promise of a love that had shaken empires and rewritten destinies, a loyalty that had proven stronger than any law, and a future built not on the rules of the land, but on the unbreakable sovereign law of the heart. The Hell's Angel and the cop had not found peace by surrendering who they were, but by accepting, completely and unconditionally, who they were together. Thank you for watching. Could you trust the person you're supposed to call the enemy? Subscribe for more stories of impossible alliances and dangerous loyalties. Where are you watching from? Let us know your city in the comments.